Okay, so now let's switch regions here. Let's move further south and let's look at some of the civilizations of Mesoamerica. Now, when you talk about Mesoamerica, there's three civilizations that are fundamental. The first is the Olmec. Now, the Olmec are pre-classical and classical. They exist around the time of the late Egyptian dynasties, well into the classical period. However, there is so little known about them that generally, they're not tested on the AP exam and there's not a lot to go on. I mean, we do know that they are the religious and cultural foundation for the later Mesoamerican civilizations like the Maya and the Aztec. Um, but beyond that, we know so little about them that there's really not much to go on. Now, also in this region are the Maya. The Maya are a classical, post classical civilization. Their reign in Mesoamerica ends somewhere around 900 CE, but they are important to this unit and are heavily tested on the AP exam because they are the most scientifically advanced of the pre Columbian Native American civilizations. And then finally, you have the Aztec Empire. This is the penultimate Mesoamerican civilization. This is the one that rules the majority of Mesoamerica in the 14th to 15th century when Europeans begin arriving in the Americas. So let's start with the Maya, and then we'll move on to the Aztec from here. As you can see, the Mayan civilization occupied most of southern Mexico as well as modern day Central America. Now, the evidence of Mayan culture goes back as far as 1400 BCE, which would make them pre classical. However, it's tough without having a strong written archaeological record to know whether this is actually Mayan civilization or if this is rollover from the Olmec civilization. Now, we do know that the Maya become the dominant civilization around 100 CE. So that pretty much puts them into the classical, post classical era. So during this time, the Maya grow into a pretty large and significant empire, mainly through war and through conquering surrounding tribes. They are very similar to the Greek city states in that there is no single unified Mayan government, that the civilization is made up of independent city states, similar to the way Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and whatnot during the height of Greek culture. Each of these city states is ruled by an independent king. Almost all of them claim descendants from one of the Mayan gods. So, again, the similarities from pre Columbian America to Europe and Eurasia go much further culturally than one might first think. This idea of religious justification of power is really a worldwide phenomenon, not just simply limited to Eurasia. Now, socially, underneath them, you would have a class of rich nobles and priests who would support the king and form his power base. Underneath them, you would have an artisan class. And then finally, at the bottom, peasant farmers, which would be by far the majority of the population. So, this social hierarchy within Mayan civilization mirrors other very early civilizations, most similarly, probably classical Egypt. Now, just like in classical Greece, these city states war constantly with one another for land, for resources, for slaves. Also, similar to classical Greece, they build large trade networks in and around their empire. In some cases, those trade networks connected as far south as Peru and as far north as the Great Lakes and Illinois. Because these cities were independent city states, they grow to massive sizes. The biggest of the Mayan city states, Palenque and Tikal, could have housed somewhere up near the range of 100,000 people, which during the post-classical era would have made them basically the biggest cities in the world outside of China. So this is no small, piddly, savage, uncivilized group of people running around in the jungle. I mean, this is a large, powerful, culturally important civilization. Most of these cities are built around a central temple to their gods. They would contain huge markets, palaces, businesses. There's evidence even of sports arenas going back into the classical and post classical era. So this is a picture of the ruins at Tikal, which, if you ever visit southern Mexico, there's a huge tourist industry that flourishes around these Mayan ruins. I've never been personally, but I highly recommend that you check them out because, I mean, this is one of the wonders of the world that you can go and see and touch and interact with, much more so than what you could with other classical civilizations. Now, like we said, the Maya were mostly peasant farmers. This was a very patriarchal society. Again, anytime you have large scale agriculture and large scale specialization of labor, that is going to be the trend that is in place. But similar to what you see in the North American societies, women do have a greater place in society. They do participate in agriculture. They do form cottage industries as well. Religiously, the Maya are polytheistic, as are all of the religions in pre-Columbian America. There is no major monotheistic religion on the continent. In the Mayan religion, you have good and evil gods. All of these gods require human sacrifice to appease them. Without that sacrifice, the gods would become offended and they would bring bad fortune to your city. Just like in classical Greece, sometimes cities would dedicate themselves to particular gods, similar to how Athens was built as a city to Athena in Greek mythology. Now, this religious belief and the need for human sacrifice also contributes to the constant warfare between the Mayan city states. Sacrifices had to be captured from neighboring cities because only high ranking nobles and priests were worthy of being sacrificed. Now, also culturally within the Maya, you have what is considered the most scientifically advanced society in pre Columbian America. These are highly advanced mathematicians, astronomers, and architects. They are one of the few civilizations in pre Columbian America to develop a written language, partially pictographic, partially alphabetic. Generally, their language was written on stone, or in some cases, there's evidence that it was written on tree bark, which was then lacquered and folded in the style of an accordion to be stored. Unfortunately, there are incredibly few examples of this remaining. Most of them were thoroughly destroyed by the Spanish during the colonization process. So, this is an example of a Mayan palace. This palace can be found, I believe, in the city of Palenque in southern Mexico. And again, this just demonstrates the architectural and mathematical ability of a very early pre-Columbian civilization. And it really should put to rest these ideas that, that Native Americans were just simply savages in the wilderness. These are very complex societies with complex governments, highly advanced science and technology, with the ability to build structures that are easily on par with anything that's being built in Eurasia at the same time. Again, going back to the Maya and their culture, the Maya developed their own numerical system based on the number 20, whereas we have a base 10 system. This allowed them to perform complex geometry, algebraic computation. Again, as you just saw, they build enormous monumental architecture. The largest temples stand over 200 feet. They also studied astronomy very extensively, creating two separate calendars, a practical and a religious one, both based on the movements of the sun. In fact, the Maya calendar in 1492, when Columbus lands in the Bahama, was more accurate than the calendar in use by Europeans at that same time. Now, unfortunately for our knowledge of them, the Maya and their disappearance is somewhat of a mystery, archaeologically and historically. There are no written records of it. Basically, what we know about it is based on educated guesses as well as environmental markers. But it's believed that around 900 CE, there was a combination of invasion from enemy tribes as well as severe drought caused by overuse of their water resources. And as well as that, there is evidence of volcanic eruptions in and around the area at the same time. And it's believed that with all of these factors combined, that the Maya people just simply abandoned their cities and escaped into the countryside, into the jungle, to avoid certain death, and then just simply never came back. Most of the major cities by that point were covered by jungle, and the majority of them were not rediscovered until the 181900s.